Did you know that football is supposed to be entertainment?
For a first down, Jones dumps it off. It's Barkley with Jones leading the way.
There are some teams that always seem to play the most boring games week in and week out. So today, let's have a look at 10 teams that always play the most boring games. Starting with the New Orleans Saints. Now, this may be a controversial one. If you wander back in time a mere 5 years, you'd think it was impossible to see the New Orleans Saints listed among the most boring NFL teams in the league. That combination of Drew Brees and Sean Payton put together a string of electric offensive seasons. There is no denying that. But man oh man, those days are gone. So much so that it borderline hurts to watch Saints games. Brees may have started to deteriorate towards the end of his career, but I would still much rather watch him be a shell of himself than watch Andy Dalton running the Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael offense. On the other side of the ball, the Saints have actually had some pretty solid units, but even that style of play is really boring. Which is unfortunate, because New Orleans was once one of the best atmospheres for a big game, and now the fans in the Big Easy have next to nothing to cheer about. I suppose it shouldn't come as a shock, though. It's pretty hard to put up an exciting product on the field when your team has a washed-up vet mucking it up at the quarterback position. And I'm sure, just as I said that, more than a couple of names and phases shuffle through your mind. But to me, there are a couple that really jump out. The Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. As much as all his haters might hate to admit it, in Denver, the boredom problems don't really start with Russell Wilson. They actually date way back to the end of the Peyton Manning days, when he was throwing wobbles all over the yard and limping up to the line of scrimmage while the Denver defense did all the work. And in the time since, Denver has slotted in some of the least entertaining quarterbacks that these two eyes have ever seen. I mean, we got Brock Osweiler, Trevor Siemian, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock. Yeah, it's simply been excruciating to watch. It was so bad, in fact, that the powers that be decided to take a roll of the dice by selling the farm to bring Russell Wilson into town from Seattle. And well, let's just say that move has backfired in a big way. With Wilson under center, this team has been worse than watching paint dry. Yeah, he has somehow taken the already impressive level of boringness that his predecessor set and put it into a whole new stratosphere. Similarly, the Colts have had a nice grab bag of boring vets slowing down their offense, like Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz, both of which have utterly failed at their limited responsibility of playing good enough football to complement a strong run game. And now that they have an offensive lineman, a center as head coach, there's no doubt that this already run-heavy, anemic passing offense will become even more focused on the ground game. Don't get me wrong, the run game can be electric. I mean, just look out west at what Kyle Shanahan has been doing in San Francisco. But what Indy does is as vanilla as it gets. Safe to say, I don't think anyone is mistaking the Colts offense for the Niners. What the Colts have tried to do is build that sort of smash-mouth, rock-solid defensive identity for their team. Think back to those early 2010 Seahawks teams with defense flying all over the field and Marshawn Lynch punishing the opposition with his brutal running style. And in many ways, those teams were actually pretty fun to watch, too. So it's not like run-first teams can't be exciting to watch. It's just that Indy needs to get the right pieces in place to actually execute their strategy. It's actually rather reminiscent of two other NFL teams, both which have admittedly done a much better job of building rosters to support their strategy. But they still play rather boring games in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tennessee Titans. Starting with the former, the Steelers have a bit of a history with putting teams on the field that know how to win ugly, dating all the way back to those steel curtain defenses. When Franco Harris was the feature back and they had monsters all over the defensive side of the ball that tortured opposing offenses that rolled into town. But even more recently, think about the early days of Big Ben Roethlisberger's career. Yes, Ben earned plenty of accolades and put up plenty of counting numbers throughout his playing days, but there is no denying that he was absolutely carried by his defense. In that running game, which featured the likes of Willie Parker and perhaps one of the most boringly effective running backs of all time, Jerome Bettis. The last few years of Ben's career were arguably even more boring than the whole deal started out as. Gone was the guy that could shake off would-be tacklers and fire a pass downfield to a receiver that miraculously had found some open space down the sideline. Honestly, gone was any semblance of a dynamic passing game whatsoever. The Steelers reverted back to pounding the rock, trying to eat up as much time of possession as they could in order to gas the opposing defense, all while keeping the opposing offense off the field. This all translated into an extremely boring style of football that was implemented to cover up their shortcomings as a team. The Titans, on the other hand, are an interesting case. They're now headed up by Mike Vrabel, a former stud linebacker for the New England Patriots and an all-time NFL tough guy. Vrabel, who'd have probably been naturally inclined to have his teams play this way anyway, inherited a roster that featured Derrick Henry, one of the most powerful and effective running backs in the game, and frankly, the team hadn't had a quarterback worth building around in years. Even now, with the resurgence of Ryan Tannehill, all of his success since joining Tennessee has been the result of going up against defenses that know their best shot at winning is to dare Tannehill to win the game himself. And as a result, the Titans have truly played some horrifically boring games over the years, and they just seem to do so on a regular basis. I mean, think back to the last game that Tom Brady played as a Patriot. The Titans won that game 20-13, and I bet half the Titans fans that watched didn't even enjoy it. Tennessee had just 272 yards of offense, and 204 of them came on the ground as they repeatedly handed it off to King Henry and used him as a human battering ram on their way to victory. I'm sure none of the players in the locker room cared. They were just happy to get that big postseason dub. But man, can games like that be reminiscent of paint drying? And you know, while we're on the subject of paint drying, has anyone tried to watch the Carolina Panthers or the Houston Texans play football recently? You want to talk about two teams that have damn near nothing redeemable about the way they play ball? These are your two frontrunners, no doubt about it. I mean, let's take a look at this year alone. Both Carolina and Houston are in the bottom three when it comes to yards per game, and neither team averages over 20 points per game. And it isn't just these statistics that are making these teams look worse than they are either. Both of them are absolutely horrific to watch. Carolina has had 3 different quarterbacks starting games in 2022. None of them are completing even 60% of their passes. And let's get one thing straight. This is not because they were going gunslinger mode and firing deep passes all around the field. The Panthers have averaged well under 200 passing yards per game, and just recently reached double digits in passing touchdowns, both of which are borderline impossibly bad metrics in the modern NFL. And now they've sent Christian McCaffrey out west, which was pretty much the only aspect of their organization that was even remotely exciting. And he's now gone. There is just not a whole lot to look forward to for Panthers fans, or really anyone with the misfortune of having to watch one of their games. The Texans have had just 2 quarterbacks start this season, but the result hasn't really been much better. Neither Davis Mills nor Kyle Allen are particularly fun quarterbacks to watch, and they haven't done much to inspire hope in Texans fans that they're trending in that direction. Thankfully, the AFC and NFC South won't play one another again for a few years, so we won't have to endure another horrendous game between these two. You know, kind of like last year's 24-9 snooze fest. Let's just hope that they can get some competent people in their respective front offices who can actually piece together rosters that are at least a little bit more exciting to watch. There is, after all, a precedent for that kind of turnaround. We're actually starting to see the seeds of one come into bloom in New York, where both the Jets and Giants, two of the most objectively boring teams to watch over the last 5 years, are starting, at long last, to move in the right direction. Though I will say, with both franchises still ranking in the bottom half of the table when it comes to key offensive stats like yards and points per game. And unfortunately, neither team really seems like it's found its long-term answer under center, which inherently can create a rather boring product on the field. But both teams seem like they have found a coach. Robert Saleh for the Jets and Brian Daboll for the Giants, both of whom are capable of building a culture and at least getting all their players on the same page. And when you factor in the influx of young, talented players like Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson for the Jets and Saquon Barkley and Wan'Dale Robinson for the Giants, there is definitely reason for hope in the Big Apple that a more consistently exciting brand of football is coming over the horizon. But of course, that being said, I'll believe it when I see it on a week-to-week basis. Until then, though, it's still fairly safe to assume that if you're throwing on one of the New York team's games, you should also expect to have a nice afternoon nap slotted in there somewhere. Because damn, do the Jets and Giants play some boring games. And last but not least, we move down to the nation's capital, where the Washington Commanders, who do their best to keep it exciting off the field, with the whole FBI investigation and potential team sale and all that, but they are still utterly incapable of playing an entertaining brand of football on the field. Even with a guy like Taylor Heineke under center, who is full of theatrics and rah-rah moments, Commanders games are still among the least exciting week in and week out. This is largely due to the team's offensive woes, however, as it ranks in the bottom third of the league in scoring offense and yards per game. Also, even with Heineke being a welcome jolt of excitement compared to Carson Wentz and some of the other meager quarterbacks that the Commanders have trotted out over there over the past few years, the reality is that most of the excitement that you feel watching him is the result of him getting way too hyped up for underwhelming plays. Heineke is the kind of guy that will hand the ball off, watch Brian Robinson run 6 yards for a first down, and celebrate like he threw the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Which, hey, don't get me wrong, it adds to the game. But he isn't exactly lighting the world on fire offensively. In fact, he's still barely averaging over 200 passing yards per game. So until further notice, I think it's safe to say that Washington is among the league's most boring teams to watch. But which NFL team do you think always plays the most boring games? Was there anyone that we missed? Let us know in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.